Hey, what's going on everyone? My name is Nam, and today we're going to talk about how to present a UX design portfolio. Now, presenting a UX design portfolio is a skill in itself. It's something that you don't do quite often. It's also something that you don't get that much feedback when you actually do it. A lot of times you'll ask for feedback after a UX design interview, and there'll be either little feedback, no feedback, or you just will be ghosted and just be kind of left in the dark. So in this video, I'm going to provide a few tips to help you basically translate or articulate your impact and value as a designer to your next interview. All right, so before I dive in, there's a few things I expect that you already have. One, I already expect that you have a portfolio. And so whether that's from a UX bootcamp or you're transitioning from one role into UX design, I expect that you have some sort of portfolio that you can share, because all the tips that I'm going to share really build off of that. Next, I expect that you already have the structure of a UX design portfolio. So what I mean by that is just having the basics around research, validation, design, specifically your design process, into your final visual or your implementation. These are going to be key, as some of these tips that I'll be giving will build off of these. But if you're not there yet, definitely leave a comment below, and then I'll try to make an additional video to this specifically around UX design structure. All right, so the first step we'll be covering is all around decision making, because it's less about what you decided to do. It's more about why you decided that direction in the first place. Because if we had the perfect scenario where we had a limited budget, we had all the influence in the world, we had amazing developers and product managers who just worked with us and everything was possible, then all your decision making would be completely streamlined. But because this is not the case typically, it's important for you to articulate the environment, the culture, the constraints and challenges that you had when you were working on this project, because this helps the interviewer see you and their environment. Because the interviewer understands their team. They understand, hopefully, the team that you will be on, the challenges that they would face, as well as some of the constraints that they already have. And for you to be able to articulate some of the details around your decision making and the context around your projects helps them just kind of get one step closer to seeing you in their atmosphere. All right, so for example, I've seen a lot of portfolios where you just have one slide at the very beginning of their project. And this is the slide where they're trying to provide all the context of their project. And unfortunately, it's just not enough. It's something that only shows kind of one dimension of your project, where you could be showing this multiple dimensions of your impact throughout the whole project, throughout the whole process. And so there's a few questions you can kind of ask yourself throughout the project to help kind of model some of these things. So some of these questions are around, why is the project important to your business? What role did you have in this project? And then the big one is probably around the challenges that you faced as a designer on this project. And then you can start going into the details of what you actually did. So I believe these questions essentially help build and frame your content into more of a story, because your portfolio should be more than just a series of events. It's you, your relationships with other people, how you overcame challenges, and how you eventually made impact as a designer. And what's really great about this is that it's kind of subtle, but starting off with questions show that you're more than just going to be someone that's going to produce deliverables. You're going to be someone that is going to be asking good questions, and you're partnering with your team to actually come up with a solution that's going to eventually make impact. So second tip, talk about the ideas you killed and why. This is basically a piggyback off the other idea, but I felt like it was important enough to make it its own tip, because essentially you want to talk about the ideas that died and how you came to a solution, because it kind of shows the progression of an idea. So typically there is some sort of pushback, right? There's either you pushing back on timelines or someone's pushing back on you. There's several different things that could happen within a team developing a solution. The reason why you want to communicate this is because, one, it talks about how you kind of logically come to a conclusion. It shows your logic within a situation. It also shows how you cooperate with others. If maybe you concede and decide to go a different path, or if you're able to influence others on a design decision, that also is communicated through providing this additional context. Another part of this as well that I think starts to paint a bigger picture is that if you talk about your process in this as well, because it's more than just talking about why you went from one iteration to another, but it also talks about why you chose to do wireframes over visual design, or the other way around, or why you decided to do a survey instead of a user interview. All these things start to paint a little more color into why you made the decisions you made based off of the challenges or constraints that you had. And this also helps the interviewer start to understand if in a certain situation, can you adapt and can you just keep moving forward? So the third tip is talking all about impact. So when you talk about impact, there's a lot of things that you could potentially talk about, but the one thing you really don't want to do is just end on the final visual and call it a day, because the impact that a UX designer can bring is more than just a visual or a deliverable. So when you think about impact and what you have brought to the business, think about what those metrics could be. And if you have access to, let's say, business metrics of how your product performed before and after your updates or your new product, definitely use those to your advantage. But not everyone typically has access to those. And so you have to start to be a little creative, even more so realistic of some of the impacts that you've made to the team. Because at this point, you've already talked about the challenges that your team has. You talked about maybe some team dysfunctions. You may have talked about some constraints that you had, but as a designer in this process, how did you make it better? Did you impact the team by increasing speed to market through really solid design libraries? Did you introduce a new design exercise that really sparked innovation? All these types of qualitative things are also impacts that you made within the team. And so it doesn't always have to be a dollar amount. And these are things that I've thrown at the very end of my presentation just to show that as a designer, I've made impact, and these are some of the things that I've done. So the key here is that you are mindful in the beginning to talk about process or challenges and all the things of why you're working on the things that you're working on. And so part of this is goals, and part of the impact is showing how you met or didn't meet those goals. And I think the truth is that it's okay if you don't actually meet those goals, but use it as an opportunity to talk about how you would change your process or how you would change the things that you did, because that's what's going to show your interviewer how you adapt and how you thought about the project. So the next tip is all around how to choose your projects. So choose your project based off of the story and not just the idea. So this one's a little interesting because I usually find designers with several things in their portfolio and they're unsure what they want to present. And they kind of lean to the one that they think is the most innovative or the biggest idea. Ultimately, it's about your story. It's about the process more than it is the idea, because each company is going to have their own set of innovative or grand ideas. But if you can't get that idea into production, then that basically starts to create a rift into how feasible the interviewer can see you within their company. Because unless they're looking for someone that is just purely in an innovation function, then it's probably gonna be something that's gonna be more of a stretch. All right, so for this last set of portfolio presentations, I've had a lot of interviewers recommend that I just do 2 or 3 projects. And I found the sweet spot to be 2. I feel like if you start to push to 3, you might start to try to squeeze in so much detail and you might start to rush yourself. But you know, a good interview is a good conversation. It's a lot of back and forth. And so for me, I had 2 projects that had 2 strong themes. The first theme was a 0 to 1 concept where I was able to be a part of every stage of the process. So that gave me the opportunity to talk through more of the breadth of my skills and allow them to kind of talk to each of those sections. So my second project was all about my impact on an existing product. And so this was more about strategy and I would say approach and my process. But essentially what this story was about was a product that had a lot of challenges getting out the door. And so when I joined, all the things that I did to see that product through. And so between these 2 projects, the impact on an existing product as well as a 0 to 1 creation of a new product, I believe that shows a good breadth and depth of my capabilities as a designer. So what's really great about having themed projects is that you can actually introduce it to your interviewer. In one of my interviews, I asked my interviewer, hey, which one are you more interested in? And I gave them the 2 choices. And that way I'm able to also frame my conversation with them, because in some cases you might not even have the full time to be able to go through both projects. I've been in interviews where I was queued up for 2, but only had time for 1. And so being able to have that first impression of the project that they're probably going to be more interested in is a good use of your time. So for the last tip, it's all about don't make your interviewer guess what you did versus others. So I would say that I'm really bad at this because I didn't really get this until I interviewed at Amazon, because they're very data driven. And when I started to say we a lot, and I did this with my interviewers prior, I just used we so much that it became kind of ambiguous to what did I exactly do. And so when I was preparing for my Amazon interview, I just refined my speech to talk exactly about what I did, but in relationship with others. And so if I was leading a brainstorming session, instead of just saying, we did a brainstorming session and these are the results, I start to frame it as, well, I saw this need for this brainstorming session, and so I recruited a few people to help me facilitate a brainstorming session. And I invited these people, and collectively we came up with this solution, and I helped decide which direction to go in. Ultimately here, you just want to be honest with your interviewer, because they need to figure out what exactly you did. Because then if you start stretching what you actually did, and maybe you start setting yourself up as like some sort of lone wolf, then you may just not be a good fit for that role, because they might be looking for someone that might be more team oriented. And if you're trying to make yourself sound like you just did all the things, or they have to guess what you did over someone who's articulating it really well, all the things they did on their project, they're most likely going to pick the other candidate, because they don't have to guess, because they don't want to contact you again after the interview asking for more detail so they can evaluate you in a proper light. All right, so if you made it this far, thanks for watching the video. I've been in UX design for a little over 10 years now, and this is my first video on UX design. And ultimately what I want to do is I want to help people get into UX design, or just generally become better UX designers. So if you're interested, definitely subscribe, like, do all the things, comment below, all the things that you'll be interested in seeing more about, and I'll try to produce more content. So thanks guys, appreciate it.